So hi, I'm not as tall as. All right, sure, record it. So yeah, I'm not as tall as Manuel, but I have to stand behind this thing. I hope you can see something. But you can definitely hear me, so that's all right. We were sitting with Manuel just before everything started, and asking politely to each other, like, would you like to go first? No, please go first. No, you go first. Because just like Manuel, I wrote this talk like a few hours ago. It's a premiere, so sorry for everything. But I had this idea on my mind for a few years already. And I was thinking to write an article, to record a video, or to make a talk out of it. And Manuel opened the what was for HTMHell, the website he runs. He used to publish some stupid example of HTML usage, like not accessible, just silly and not usable at all there. But then he started posting some articles, and was it will be in December when you're going to start this like calendar of articles. So I started to write an article and prepare a talk at the same time. So that's what it is. Just a few things about myself. I'm Google developer expert. I work as a front-end engineer at a German agency. I'm based in Berlin. I moved there 2 years ago from St. Petersburg, Russia. Originally, I'm from a Russian-speaking community, and it's my first time in Hamburg. So I will still have some time tomorrow to enjoy the city, but I think I'm gonna return at some point because I really like what I've seen so far. So see you some other time apart from this meetup. And I also into podcasting, and this is the podcast we record with Bruce Lawson. If you're into that kind of stuff, just go and listen. We talk about accessibility, web platform, web standards, browsers, and Bruce is responsible for bad puns. I'm responsible for bringing some news. So yeah, that's our podcast. This is I'm into this thing like a lot. I record a lot of podcasts, but it's the only one that's English speaking. So sorry about that, but I think you might enjoy it. What I'm gonna go back to the first slide. Just like in every talk I prepare, I spend most of the time looking for a good cover, not preparing the actual slides. And I was trying to show to find like a picture that shows where we can go if we would rely exclusively on idea of HTML semantics, not the common sense, not the accessibility, not user experience. So the idea is that we always say, write semantic HTML and everything's going to be fine. And I'd like to challenge this idea, and I think it's not always correct, or maybe it's completely wrong. And I'm going to tell you some stories from my past to convince you, and maybe show some examples of today's web. So in simple days, we just like most of the front-end developers, I got involved into the web by HTML. I got a book. I think it was called like HTML in 24 hours or something like this, and I read it. I read through it, and like half a year later, I got my first job. It was simple time back then, and I considered HTML just a set of building blocks. Like for example, if you wrap some text in H1, it will become big and bold. So if you need a big bold text on your web page, you use H1. I mean, it wasn't that long time ago. We weren't using like font elements because we had CSS, and it was totally fine. But we would use tables for layout because it was easy, like 2 table cells and you have left and right column. Because we didn't have flexbox or grid or something like this. We had some floats, but we weren't, we didn't know how to use them properly. So we would use tables for layout. And I don't know if you remember this one. I never used it on production website, but I know people who did. And you did? Oh my! What was the use case?
There was no use case.
No, it doesn't count. But for me, HTML, like I said, it was like, I don't know, just a set of buttons in Word. I would press B to get something bold. I would press left. I would press, I don't know, I would use some other elements to create some structure. But it would basically be a content, not interface, not layout. For the rest, we would use, what else? We would use like divs, spans, and some styles. So HTML was basically a way to decorate your content. But then at some point, a trend called web standards emerged. And we started to, and some people came up with an idea that you should use your HTML not as a visual container, not as a visual building block, as a set of visual building blocks, but as a meaningful wrapper for your content. Meaning that if you have main heading on your page, you would use H1. If you have I don't know, button, you would use button. If you have paragraph, you would use paragraph, etc., etc. So we started to dig through HTML 4.1 spec. It was during that time. It was actually superseded only in 2018. So it lasted for a while, and we would dig through through this spec, trying to find meaning behind HTML tags, and those people were convincing enough, and I joined this web standards movement. So I started to think about HTML as not a set of visual building blocks, but set of blocks that bring meaning to my content or play nicely with my content. So we started studying the spec, and the spec itself would say things like, just let me check. Yeah, the people that would bring this web standards idea would say something like B and I elements weren't cool enough because let me show you this one. Yeah, B and I weren't cool anymore because they were visual. So we had to use strong and EM for emphasis and choosing and showing something very important on our web pages. And UL and OL, like unordered and ordered lists, were not just for content, but also for a list of articles or for menu items. So we started to think about some basic building blocks in HTML. We started to apply it to a bigger number of things. We started to apply it to actual UI, not just content. And what else? And we accidentally discovered that there are some definition lists in the spec. We decided that tables are not for layout not because it wasn't they were pretty reliable compared to floats. Tables were super reliable. They were just as grid layout today. Your content wouldn't go anywhere if you would put it in 2 table cells. And floats were flimsy. They would fall apart. They had some bugs in IE, and we had to give up using tables only because it was semantically incorrect. only because we thought it's wrong. And we suffered for a while, and we figured out some other ways to make two-column layout, for example. But the main idea behind this was that we were trying to align with the spec, that we were trying to make it right according to HTML semantics. That was our main goal, to align with the spec, to play by the rules that W3C people wrote for browsers and developers. And that lasted for a while, and we were also very interested by this idea of semantics, and we would and how would we check if something is semantical or not? We would look at our markup, we would look at the spec, and we would compare them, like if it's correct, if it's not, and we would validate our HTML with this HTML validator. We would put it in our headers, footers, everywhere. It would mean nothing to actual users, but we were super proud, so we had to put it on our websites. And that was the times of HTML4. But then came this Cambrian explosion of HTML5. I'm not sure if you remember these times, but there were so many elements added to HTML that we had no idea what to do with them all. So we started to learn new ways of writing HTML. And we thought about HTML5 as new hope, because like I showed you, HTML 4.1 stagnated for a while. Then there was HTML 1.0 that was a failed experiment, and we were looking at HTML5 like something's good happening with our markup, with our language, and it looked cool, to be honest. I mean, they developed the whole branding for it, some logos, some slogans, and this page is still up on W3C website. Good links don't break, good links don't expire. So this one is still there, and it looks a bit silly from like 15 years later, or how many years later, but still that was very impressive back then. And they even and what happened? There are many things changed when they introduced HTML5. I'm not going to go through all of that, but the main things and the important things regarding semantics and regarding the way we would work with HTML were landmarks. They added based on naming conventions they found on internet, like headers, footers, menus, navigations. They added some landmarks, some parts of the website that are used on almost every website, like typical sites. Form elements like dates, emails, numbers, ranges, and things like that. And also some media and interactive content. Before HTML5, we would use Flash. We would use some embedded players, some foreign creatures would stay on our web pages and just to play some MP3 or just to show some video, and it was native. That was huge, and they even created a logo for certain technologies in the realm of HTML5, and that was official logo of HTML5 semantics. Did you know that there is a logo for semantics? There it is. Yeah, I guess you can imagine that it wasn't very well known, this design system for HTML5, but yeah, you can print a t-shirt with that, but no one will ever understand it, sorry. Probably me and yeah, just a group of people from this audience. We can have our secret club, like with our logo, HTML semantics. It looks a bit like from military, so I wouldn't wear it everywhere, but yeah, anyway. So yeah, they had a logo, they redefined a lot of stuff, and they brought back B and I. HTML4 and XHTML specifically would say that these tags are wrong and we should deprecate them. And HTML5 said, you know what? they're fine. Let's redefine them. Let's use them for something else. I don't quite remember what they came up with, but one of the use cases for I element was to name ships. So if you would write an article with a name and you would mention a ship, you would put it in I element because of some very old typographic tradition. If you read some old books, you might find ship names in italic in those kind of books. So they thought for some reason that it was a good idea. But yeah, every time you mention a ship name these days, use I. That would be correct according to spec. That would be correct according to HTML5 and the modern HTML spec. And they also introduced something else. They also introduced outline algorithm, idea of outline. Basically, you would, for example, create a section and then put h1 inside of it, and that would be a level 1 header on your web page. But then you could create another section and put another h1 inside of it, and that it would be level 2 heading, and section 3 and level 3. So basically, browser would. The idea was that browsers would figure out, and browsers and screen readers and all kind of user agents would figure out the nesting, would figure out the heading levels based on the nesting. And right now, actually, in some browsers, or maybe in all of them, there are some styles that change the styling of these. If you would write your HTML code like this, but don't do this. This is bad for accessibility. No browser ever supported it, apart from styling. No screen reader ever supported it, but they put it in the spec. And I think it existed in the spec since they launched HTML5 like 10, 15 years ago, and they removed it only last year. So in the spec, there was a recommendation to use something like this for how many years? And we were still very much drunk on semantics. We were still very much following everything that the spec would say back then. And I've seen this kind of stuff on real websites. And I argued with many people to remove it, and they would say that it's in the spec, it's semantic. What's the problem? And that's what's one of the main reasons for me to start thinking about this kind of talk or article. And for a while, HTML5 spec existed in two variants. First, it appeared as W3C recommendation. It was the last version of HTML5. They started to work on HTML 5.2 at some point, but then they decided to merge the whole work under the whole HTML work under another spec. It's called HTML Living Standard, and this is basically what WG organization that started this HTML5 thing. They brought it to W3C, and then they took it back. So right now there's no HTML5, there's no HTML 5.1, 0.2, 0.3, there's no HTML6. Don't try to look for this, because there are some weird people trying to create HTML6. So there's only HTML Living Standard, just so you know. And in this HTML Living Standard, like I mentioned, there was an outline algorithm. There was this recommendation to use nested H1s for a while. And we, just like I said, we were drunk on semantics. We were blindly trusting the spec for a while. And maybe some of you do trust this semantics or specs these days as well. I stopped doing this a while ago, and I've seen a lot of weird stuff because like I mentioned, those nested H1s and other examples. And I thought I would play a little game with you. And you know this stuff in the on socials when they say wrong answers only. So I will show you some pictures, and you would try to come up with a real HTML tag that would fit this picture. Like, imagine you would have to code this picture somehow in a single tag. What tag would you choose? Like this one, for example. This is a bunch of icons. What kind of tags would you choose? Wrong answer only, and quite common, to be honest. Huh? I. Do you have I elements for icons in your code?
Font awesome, right?
Yeah. Bootstrap. I think Bootstrap invented it, and Font Awesome made it popular as well. Bootstrap apologized and removed it, but it's still it's everywhere. So yeah, but that was easy. That's correct. What would you use for this one? Something wrong, but that would still make sense. Any idea? Table? That's good idea. But no, something. How does it look?
Like an article.
Yes, article. You see an article, you use tag article. Easy, right? But article is not for articles, even according to spec. But a lot of people use HTML spec as dictionary. They have an idea in mind, like I need to mark up my article somehow. They go and look for something that sounds like article, and they find it. The same goes for icons, I guess, but I think it was just a joke that lasted longer than it should be. And what about this one? Like two persons talking to each other. What would be the perfect element for this conversation?
Dialogue.
Huh?
Dialogue.
Yes, it's a dialogue. Easy, right? Two people talking to each other. I mean, it sounds funny, but I've seen weird stuff in other people's code. Because not sure about you, but when I open website, like 50% of the time, I also open source code, just out of curiosity. Because when I see something weird going on, like an image loading, like I'm using a very old and very slow connection, I go there and I profile, and I don't usually remember what was the reason why I opened this website in a few moments. But yeah, good dialogue. What about this one? That should be easy.
No.
Is there a map element? Is there a map element in the HTML?
For image maps.
There is one. There is one, but it's for something completely different.
It's make area.
Yeah, just to draw something over the image, some hotspots. You can make links. So it's now. I mean, I used it many years ago. You haven't heard about this even. So, but it's still in the spec, just for backward compatibility and for some weird reasons. Yeah. Actually, there's a community group developing a bunch of standards for working with maps on the web. And it's too late to use this tag because it's already taken. It's like for historical reason they will have to implement create a new tag, but still. What about this one? What tags what tag that's in the HTML would fit here? There's no beer tag. Menu. Good idea. Yeah, menu. Again, do you know what the menu for? Like, not for beer menu, not for restaurant menu. That's for sure. But it's not for navigation either. Like, it's just for context menus. So if you open something, let me show you. Open something like this. This is menu. So inside of menu, there should be a list of buttons. That's menu. And people would still use it for navigation menus. Like if you go through HTML, the data they use for HTML archive, not for HTML almanac, you can find a lot of examples where people use menu for navigation menus. And this is kind of all right if you just think about it. Like Manuel showed that you can invent your own elements. What's the problem in using menu for navigation menu? But we'll talk about this later. Okay, what about this one? What's the proper tag for source code? Code? It's kind of correct. I said wrong answer only. Scripts, yeah, but no, actually script would actually work because you can have script and some JavaScript inside of it. So something completely weird. There is a source element. It's a source, right? It's easy. You just go. You need to highlight your source code. You go to HTML spec and you find a source tag, whatever. It's probably it's not gonna work because source is very special kind of elements. I think it's hidden by default because it goes inside of picture and video, just to show the different sources of elements. Okay, that should be tough one.
Link.
Huh? Any? Huh?
Link.
Link? No. I'm not a gamer, but as far as I know, it's a specific game. Legend. Legend of Zelda. Yeah, sorry. That was a tough one. And maybe the last one. Okay. So yeah, this is kind of element you have in web components. So you knew that. So I'm making fun of this, not because I mean I was trying to change the mood a bit and to show you some silly examples that I encountered and on the web. I haven't seen all of them, but I've seen some of them, and they were naively correct. People would assume if they have certain tasks and they go to the spec, they can find answers for their tasks. But I think this idea of semantics, this idea of using HTML spec as a dictionary for your own needs is completely wrong, and it hurts the web, and it hurts our work, and it hurts our users. And we should, focus. And we should start making sense out of HTML, out of our job, because I would say that it's not too late because HTML spec is a good thing. It's improving all the time. Like I mentioned, they decided to remove this outline algorithm last year, and they also introduced new tag recently, like a search one, search tag. And there's currently, I'm following the discussion in the WhatWG account on GitHub. They would like to introduce attribute that would automatically change the level of headings depending on the basically it would reset level of headings because you can have some random components in the random parts of your website, but if you put your attribute on the wrapper, it will change it could be like H1, but there's going to be heading level start or something like this attribute with a number. It would change the level of headings. So they're trying to improve it all the time. But meanwhile, we should probably stop talking about semantics and start talking about something else. I often hear this idea. So I've seen a lot of smart people repeat it. And I kind of agree with that. So if you write semantic markup, it will be mostly accessible. And this is correct. Because if your markup is not semantic according to the spec, then it's probably garbage, because you're just making up stuff using divs and classes and CSS and some JavaScript, like usually a lot of JavaScript. But if you write semantic markup based on what's in the spec, you should be fine. But I don't think it's correct, because I often see people look at someone else's markup and see 25 levels of nested divs. And they say, this markup is not semantic because there are many divs in there. And divs are, I mean, they're bad for performance, because when there are many of them nested, and it could slow down the rendering of your web page, for example. But for screen readers, like for users, they're transparent. There could be like 300 of them. It won't make a difference apart from performance. That's a specific case. So like Chris Coyer said a while ago, and I agree with him, and we should probably accept it, that we are developers. I like this thing, because if something doesn't matter to users, then we should not be ashamed of it. We should, if we need like 20 nested divs, why wouldn't we use 20 nested divs? Because semantics doesn't matter. What matters is the user experience. If it's good for our user, if it's loading fast, if it's renders quickly, if it's accessible to screen readers, then it's fine. So stop measuring websites based on the number of divs. I mean, it would be good if among those divs there are some H1s, links, images, etc., etc. If it's the only tag you use on your web page and you have div on click as a link, then it doesn't make sense. Not because it's not semantic, but because the user experience is poor. Because I cannot right-click, open link in a new tab. Because I cannot copy link. Not because it's semantically incorrect. That's what I'm trying to convey here. And also, browsers and screen readers don't often implement what's in the spec. There are many things. There's a gap between what spec says and what's actually in the browsers and screen readers. And there are probably two main reasons for that. Is that priorities of browsers are different. You know, like you probably know this better than I do, that accessibility is not always number one priority for everyone, including browsers. I heard this kind of impression from many people working on accessibility standards, even at Google, even at Mozilla, even at Apple. They always say like accessibility matters, but when it comes to spending some resources, when it comes to hiring people, it's always like second priority, unfortunately. So that's the fact. And also different browsers have different points of view on certain things. Like Manuel mentioned, Safari wouldn't implement is attribute for some reasons, and it's not the only difference. And the second thing is actual user experience. For example, certain browsers, they have you heard about this thing like user agent string? It's a long string when every browser ever existed on Earth mentioned for some reason, and browsers send this to server when they introduce themselves. It's a part of a handshake, like, here's my user agent, do something with it. And it's called user agent string. And why is it called user agent? I mean, it's not a reason, but I like this idea. Browser is user's agent. It caters to users' needs, first of all, and only then to the spec, only then to actual website developers and the rest of the world. So often browsers change their behavior to cater their users' needs. And they disable semantics of lists if they're like in Safari. They disable semantics of lists if there's a list style none or something. It would be if it doesn't look like a list, then it's not considered a list in Safari. And to make it list again, you have to type something like row list something, and it will become list again. So you have to do this kind of stuff. They decided at some point that it hurts their users, because if everything is a list, then it's cumbersome to navigate web pages. So browsers do this all the time. They do not implement certain features. They implement and then remove it for accessibility reasons, or for some other reasons as well. Steve Faulkner wrote an interesting article a while ago. I think he wrote it for the first time like in 2008, like many years ago, and he tries to make it up to date, and he lists all the text level semantic elements like strong, em, I, mark, span, ins, del. There are 116 elements in the HTML, to be actually. So I don't remember all of them, but there are plenty. And if you look at this table, like first of all, you can snap a quick photo to read this article. I think it's quite important to understand the relationships between the browser, screen readers, and the spec as well. This is not the full table, but basically it's the top part of it. And there are in the left column there's a strong B, em, I, del, s in Smark, and there are a few more. And on top, unfortunately, it's covered by the Zoom panel, but it's like JAWS and VDA, VoiceOver, narrator, VoiceOver on Mac, VoiceOver on iOS. And if you see, no indication means that those strong em, I, del, is in Smark elements are like spans. They have no meaning. They have no use for screen readers, most of them. Sometimes ins and del elements have some voice change, and they convey information that there's an insertion or mark. You can get some mark and delete it with del and s, because s is strike. But in general, like for example in VoiceOver, there's no indication for most of them apart from deletion and insertion. Which means when we argue for hours if it's correct to use B or strong, if we argue for hours if it's correct to use I for icons or EM for emphasis, it means nothing to actual users. It could be span style font weight bold, and it would be semantically incorrect, but for end users it would mean the very same thing as B or strong or any other element. And I think it's important for us to understand that the actual user perspective is more important than semantically correct markup or anything that any idea that we took from the spec, because actual user experience is what we're aiming for. And if we go to if we use typical widget from HTML, like semantic input type date. It's recommended by the spec. It's in all the articles you can find on front end. They all say use native input type date because it's semantic. It's going to be better for your users. It's going to be amazing. But I took screenshots, and I think the first one it's is Firefox, the second is Chrome, the third is Safari, and all of them will be different for our users. That's all right. Websites not supposed to look the same in all browsers, but sometimes there are dots, sometimes there are slashes, sometimes they look one way or the other, and they don't they don't change their look depending on my system settings. And if I have a different position of date and month, if I have something else, if I change the language of the page, they don't change. So it's a nice idea, but for end users, it always doesn't work. It doesn't help them. Maybe on mobile, they will have like certain keyboard or certain widget, but on desktop, it won't help. So maybe it would be better for you to use non-semantic custom widget from NPM, because the end user experience would be better. So semantic is not always better. Semantic is not even an idea worth pursuing, in my point of view. And if you write semantic markup, it will be mostly accessible. This very idea, I think it should be, I mean, it's all right. It will still help you to get out of this tag soup with divs and on clicks. But if you'd like to go further, I think it should be something like, if you care about user experience, it will be fully accessible. If you actually test your websites, if you actually try to make it work better, look better, behave better for your users, if you understand user needs, if you know what screen readers are, if you know there are different browsers, if you know that there are desktop and mobile, and there are old smartphones, new smartphones, small screens, so many things, then it will be fully accessible and high quality, and the user experience will be better. Not because your markup is semantically correct, because as I showed you, there's a huge gap between spec and the actual implementation and the actual user experience. This talk is going to be an article soon, I hope. I have a deadline. Damn. I have to write everything down. I hope there's a recording. Because I improvised a lot. So you can read the proper version of it with some words and pictures later at HTMHell.dev. And I'd like to thank you. There's another gloomy picture for you. If you'd like to get in touch, I have a website where I write some articles, and I might repost this article or link to it later. And there are some contacts, so you can get in touch with me and ask some questions if you don't have time right now. Or yeah, let's talk if you have any questions. Like semantics is all right, or what, Manuel?
Thanks a lot for the talk. You just said that, you know, if you care about user experience and it will be accessible and you have to test. And that's the thing. Like, it's so hard to tell whether or not the thing that you are writing, the semantic elements you picked, are correct, or if they will make any difference for the user. Like, how many of you do know the difference between the article element section and div? It's really hard to say. Like, you have to invest, like I invested, and I swear, weeks learning and researching and finally understanding what the article element does and what it doesn't do, what the section does and what it doesn't do, and how it's different to a div, because section and div are pretty much the same, except for, and then, you know, something. Same with paragraphs. If you don't use a paragraph and just this, who cares? It's the same, pretty much the same experience. Maybe some shortcuts are different, but screw is only not a paragraph, unfortunately.
Yeah.
But then again, you have stuff that sounds great, like the S element or striking stuff through. And I've seen websites where they have like e-commerce shops where they say product so and so it costs 120 euros, and it's an S element, it's dragged through, and then it says 100 euros. And Screenreader says it costs 120, 100 euros. Because it's dragged through the S element doesn't convey any information.
Yeah,
and
yeah.
I know that because I don't have a life and I test this stuff. But who else does that? Like, you really have to invest a lot of time and a lot of resources, a lot of money, basically, in testing that stuff, not just in one browser, but in different browsers, not just with one screen, but with different screens. So it's really, really hard to get that right. And then you have new elements. Sorry.
I mean, they pay us money to do this. I mean, it's not our hobby. They pay us money.
Yeah, but you only have a limited time to build stuff and understand things. Like, for example, dialogue. Dialogue is great, but if it wasn't for people like Scott O'Hara, who writes 2 articles and explains all the problems in different browsers, it would be really hard to tell, can I use this now, or do I like to consider certain things? And still, like, if you use dialogue in different browsers and screen readers, they will do different things when you use the keyboard, for example. So it's great advice, but really hard to follow.
But so you say that if you don't have enough time and resources, follow semantics, good patterns mentioned in the spec, but not all of them, because some of them are harmful. How would you know which one to follow?
Yeah, it's the point, you don't know. And
yeah.
It's not something that an individual can solve by testing. It's that we collectively as a community have to solve. Like,
I guess.
Something like MDM or whatever, other platforms, or I don't know other examples because there aren't really. There used to be CSS to express in peace, but websites like that, the people who share content, people like you, for example, it's our collective job to share that information. But then again, still, even if the information is accessible, it's really hard.
But then they write an article on CSS tricks. It's respectful of a website, and then people copy paste, and there's a mistake. There's an inaccessible example in there. I've seen an inaccessible example in Smashing Magazine articles, in CSS trick articles. I would usually go and comment there, and I usually get in touch with the author and point to some mistakes, but I don't always have time, and they don't always answer. So even as a community, we always fail to actually we trust information too much out there.
We have to like we rely on that information because everything else is really hard to do, like testing on your own. Just think about the article that showed the details, the summary inconsistencies in this article. A lot of tables, a lot of different values. I spent hours just using screens because the results were so different. Not everyone has those resources. I'm a freelance, like if I don't have, no one hires me, I can just do that stuff. But in a day-to-day job, not everyone can do that. So we have to rely on the information others provide us with.
Just double check everything at least. I would suggest. But yeah,
I agree. Our job and our bosses or stakeholders, whoever, should provide us with the resources for people to do that. But that's just unfortunately.
Yeah, we can continue this discussion later. But any other questions? Sorry.
Everything. Have you ever worked with a web agency? Because they do not allow you to do that.
I work in agency right now, so yeah, I know.
Mostly, at least. They just want to get a job done visually, and that's fine, and no one cares about accessibility in there. Mostly, I guess. And so I guess it's fine to just tell people care about semantics, and you get the most accessible site, and then you can start testing for accessibility issues. You can catch most of that like this. If you do it the other way around and tell people not to care about not about semantics at all, then we would be way off. We would be off way worse, I guess.
It sounds to me like a thing you would say to a child instead of explaining, like, "Oh, come on, I don't have time. He wouldn't understand. So like, don't do this. just because, or some made-up reasons, like there's a fairy, there's a Santa Claus, or something like this. So it sounds to me like that. So don't tell people the whole truth. Just saying like there's a magic semantics. Just follow it. I don't know.
Yeah, but that's an idealistic point of view. You don't always have the time and resources to do that.
That's true.
And in the end, it just ends up being a bad product at the user side.
I really like what's going on in the audience. I think I struck a nerve or something. Yep, please.
In the beginning, you said like good URLs don't change, so you basically hope that websites stay out there for 10, 20
Well,
years or whatever.
in ideal world, yeah.
And then later you have that table with the support of the screen readers for different elements.
Uh-huh.
So what do you think about, yeah, they don't support those elements now, they don't convey the meaning of them, but maybe they do in like 5 years or 10 years, and then your website is still out there. And if you had used those semantic elements then back then, like now and in the future, they are actually supported.
I haven't seen many websites that are actually used by people and that are actually popular, and they like are everyday websites that stay unchanged in terms of like markup, styling, and everything for a couple of years even. They always change. So it's like relying too much. I mean, in the future, the same tags that you were hoping to that would make your site better in the future, they might even hurt your website because the spec would change, because browser behavior would change. So there's no hope for future here because things are changing. I wouldn't rely too much. I wouldn't, because what's the main problem here? People rely on semantics, and then they calm themselves down. Like, okay, it's fine. It's semantic. Then it means that it's good, but it's not enough. There should be an extra step. There should be an extra step. It's semantic, but now I'm going to test if it's actually good. Yeah.
And the problem is usually you take the first step, then the second, and the third step. The third step is testing. The second step is using semantic HTML, and based on stuff that the experts will tell you or specifications and stuff like that. But the reality is, most people don't even take the second step. Otherwise, I wouldn't have a job. Like, my job is to tell people don't use a div, use a button. Don't nest a link in a button.
You should stop writing articles because you make people smarter, and they won't hire you because they would know everything themselves.
The problem is if people if everyone who builds websites would take the second step and actually implement semantic HTML, then it would be smart to add testing to that. But most just don't take the second step. They just do whatever someone who maybe doesn't specialize in HTML will recommend them, or whatever they believe is a smart idea. And this is quite often, you know that stuff like divs or ARIA
Roles, yeah. Don't get me wrong. I'm not suggesting that you would throw away all your paragraphs, links, and inputs and everything like that. But just don't rely on idea that if it's semantics, if it's good. It will fail you at some point. It might be already failing you because you haven't tested enough. Yep.
Just a random little point. My brain is connected the standards people, rule makers, and we're all human, right? They're writing rules. They think oh well, this is how this should be. This is how that should be. This is how people should behave. This is how we're making websites. We go to those lists because we're like, oh, we need now to do it right. And we go to those lists in real life for all the laws because we don't want to get picked up by the police and we want to do things right. But we're all human and these things change, and slavery was lawful at one point, So I'm kind of not fussed about things changing. It sounds fine. And it's just we need to keep abreast of it a bit. but it's obviously a lot of work. And when you're in a busy agency, or like a junior like me, I'm just like, just trying to get stuff semi-right, and if someone reviews it and goes, "It's fine," I'm like, "Great!" Boy. You know, so it's yeah. Everyone ought to try a bit harder, we're all human.
Yeah. Again,
some people we want to read our websites too, and some of them can't see, so we need to help them too.
yeah, I'm human too. I'd like to have some free time for myself as well. So yeah, I understand what you're talking about, but there's no magic. There's no silver bullet. There's no like only article or only spec you can read and everything's going to be fine. That's the main idea behind this talk. Stop relying on this semantics idea too much.
I think the same is with the law.
If you choose to believe in Santa Claus, semantics, or fairies, that's all right. It can calm you down. It can make your life more comfortable. But just remember, it's not always helping you. Sometimes it hurts what you do.
Okay. So I guess it's very similar to like writing JavaScript, right? Sometimes you actually have to write JavaScript to make something accessible. I think that's
yes.
Same idea.
It's the only way. Once it's more complex than a link and an image. If something's opening, before we get a full cross-browser support for popover attribute. Before that, we still need to use JavaScript for everything that's interactive. Yes.
Yeah, I also wanted to say thank you to the point about these nesting sections and the H1, so the multiple H1 elements.
Yeah.
I was super confused about this in the spec. I read about this in the spec, and it always felt wrong for me.
Yeah, just find Steve Faulkner somewhere on internet and say thank to him, because he spent a few years trying to remove it from the spec. And he did it last year. I was celebrating.
And I actually found the GitHub issue, and another one that was connected to Steve's one, where someone said, and can we now please also get rid of the visuals, like the styling?
Yeah.
Because like it explained, it visually conveys that there is some kind of nesting. And I said, yeah, can we please do that? I was just trying to pick up the issue, and they said, nope, we ran some tests and it would break on so many websites, but they have some kind of mechanism to test a lot of sites.
Yeah, it will change the font size a little bit, because if you haven't set it, yeah, so it's...
So one person said, no, we're not going to change it because it would break too many websites on the web. And then some others said, no, but let's talk about maybe be smart, but it seems like they're not going to change.
I think it's still on the table. Like, I'm following a few other discussions. Yeah, it's very hard to remove something from the web if you introduced it at some point.
One more thing about the I elements. I didn't know about the Western shift thing. I looked it up. I was reading the spec. It says that if you're using Western shift, then you have to use the I element. But I remember that at some point it also said that it is a dream sequence, or a thought, or a transliteration, or a lot of things.
Yeah. They have an example from Blade Runner, I think. They used to have, I think in previous version of the spec, or maybe it's in the current one, they used to have an example of Blade Runner, and it's a script of a movie for the movie, and they would mark it with I elements for some reason. Wow.
I also teach HTML, and when I introduce students to the I element, I say that the I stands for irgendwas. Anything, something, because it's really hard to explain what it is.
All right. By the way, I wouldn't use I for icons because I'm old school, but like I showed you, it doesn't make any difference. So keep using it if you like it. Yeah.
So far, the discussion has been mostly about the browser rendering something to the user. And something that I personally find very interesting about HTML, it's in the center of a graph of a lot of different actors, let's say.
Yep.
So you will have, for example, crawlers like Google
Yes.
going around and trying to extract information and stuff like this. And I've seen the push for web semantic or semantic web,
yeah.
But from the other side, so more people who basically want to be able to extract meaningful information and basically arrive to the same conclusion that you did, but not from the point of view of like the person using the browser, but basically it's not reliable. So you always have to implement something else. So it doesn't matter if you actually have this very nice semantic thing.
Yeah.
But it's still something that is interesting in some situation. Like you will have crawlers, you will have, for example, screen readers, you will have things like the reader mode that you have.
Yes, yes.
The reader mode in Firefox, for example, is really, really stupid, but works very well. And something very stupid it does, if you just check, is there a main? If you have a main, it's already some can bring without of things around. Because it's supposed to be that matter.
Yeah, but it's. I think it's not the only thing, because if it's an article on a website that doesn't use main, it will still be used.
But the thing, like if you check the implementation, it's really hard to check.
And all the browsers, they do their own heuristics. They all try to guess.
Yeah, it's exactly this. Every time you have the thing that you cannot rely upon semantics, so you have to create heuristic, as you say. And it's just interesting to think about the different way this HTML is used at the end. And it just you mentioned mostly, and the previous talk was also mostly about a user browsing the web. I guess that's maybe what you're more familiar with.
Yes.
But basically, you have the same discussion, but kind of disconnected, but in all the other aspects of it.
Yeah, as for search engines, they gave up parsing tags. These days they parse our website as a text, and sometimes they add some weight to certain parts of this text based on the different kind of things, including tags, including styling, including position in on the page. So it's their commercial secret. Every search engine have their own ways, but they don't rely on markup anymore. It's just one of the things they check, but not the main one. So it's too late for us to rely on semantic markup on the web for search engines, even for reader modes, because they just test it on the top 100 websites, and if it's fine, then they use it. Then algorithm is fine. I mean, algorithm that detects the main content of the page. But if it breaks on some others, yeah, sure, why not a big deal. So it's always like that. It's semantic web is a nice idea. Microdata, JSON, LD, this kind of stuff. It's just a data format on top of the markup. So if you need it for search engines, you just created another tree, another bunch of classes, another external data. So again, too late for semantics to help here. I mean, it's not like too late. It's probably never would have worked, but oh well. The only thing that actually this idea of semantics, this idea of web standards, behind web standards movement, this is actually that brought me to the web, brought me to the community. This is why I'm here talking to you, because many years ago it wasn't just yet another language like JavaScript, PHP, HTML. No, it was something different, something very with some meaning behind it, with some ideas how to improve it, how to make it properly, how to, I don't know, how to cater user needs at some point even. And this is very, very good idea, and I'm sorry that I'm just destroyed it in front of you. But I still believe in this idea. I just want to warn you, it's not the whole thing. It's just
Yes, and that will ease it in the future too, because it's somehow a convention how we write markup.
Yeah.
And it's keeping a way of thinking, giving class names to just still there article.
Yeah. Yeah, we should probably stop this conversation and bring some other speakers. Yeah, thank you.